All right. Well, thank you all so much for being here. I'm Shannon Decker with an organization called the Speedy Foundation. We are suicide prevention and mental health action nonprofit. We work locally with the Suicide Prevention Coalition and do a lot of mental health literacy. I work with Lizzie on some initiatives through the hospital. We are going to be talking about social emotional learning. It's shortened to just an acronym of SEL for coaches. So thank you for being here. I'd like to start out just to know who's on the phone and who's on the call with us. If you could share your name, your role as a coach, and then thinking back to your childhood, who was one adult that you trusted in your life? Is there anyone who wants to kick things off?
I'll go first, Shannon.
Thank you.
I am Lizzie Hesse. I am a support coach, and one trusted adult was my neighbor, my friend's mom, and also my neighbor.
Awesome. Thank you, Lizzie.
Hi, Tom. I'm one of the coaches for the past few years. I would say a trusted adult growing up was my mom, luckily.
Awesome. Awesome. Thanks, Tom.
My name's Kimberly Baird. I'm sort of a coach sometimes. And but I'm the president, so I run a lot of the different things. And my trusted adult, I was trying to think, I mean, outside of like my parents, I had a best friend's mom that was really someone I trusted.
Awesome. Thank you, Kimberly. All right, Adam or Tom? I think Tom Richards is still trying to connect to audio. Adam, are you able to join us? Okay. If anything changes, just feel free to holler. Well, again, my name is Shannon, and I love mountain biking, but I am not a mountain bike coach. I've done a little bit of guiding, but I do coach skiing as well as yoga. And I had a trusted adult who really meant a lot in my life. It was my step aunt, and her name was Sherry. But I'm one of those kids that really didn't rely on my parents very much as the trusted adult. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what kids like that look like. So our learning targets for today is to talk about the SEL framework. We want to talk a little bit about stress, trauma, and ACEs. That's another acronym that stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. We're going to talk about risk and protective factors. We've got some coaching tips and tricks to talk about. We've got a little coaching scenario, and then we'll have some time for Q&A. And I've got some local resources for mental health and crisis, but I'm also looking to see what resources are you looking for, and then I can pull those together and send those out to you. So social emotional learning is becoming a lot more mainstream. Our local school district has adopted social emotional learning, and you'll see it, across the K-12 system. What that encompasses is self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And this is taught through curriculum and instruction in classrooms. It's taught through school-wide practices and policies in a school environment. And then in our homes and in our communities, in our constructive recreation, we have family and community partnerships. So the more organizations are aware of what SEL really looks like, and they start practicing it, modeling it, doing some direct instruction when it's needed, the sooner we can have a society of people who are able to manage themselves better. They are able to have better relationship skills. They've got better decision-making skills. So what this might look like for self-awareness would be like recognizing their own emotions and values, as well as their strengths and their challenges. We know that we want to see, responsible people out on our trails, whatever events we're doing. And that starts young with making ethical, constructive choices about our personal and social behavior. We also know that everyone is born with a temperament. And so these are some charts from Iowa State University looking at temperament. These are things that we are just born with. And we have these different categories, like our activity level. Do we have really high, active, engaged, large muscle movements, or is it slower? Are we further down on the continuum where we might walk to the swings? We take more breaks during play. We might be tired from large muscle movement. So we have these different domains, and a temperament is something that we're just born with. Social psychologists and developmental psychologists spend a lot of time really studying this, but this is a chart to really look at what these different temperament scales look like in school-age children. And then we've also got teenagers with their intensity, their distractibility, what their sensitivity might look like. And some of the kids, if you are a parent, you might have kids that you're coaching who are very different from the kids that you've raised. You might have several children that you're raising, and you know that their temperaments are very different. It has not a lot to do with nurture. It comes through nature. So this is something to take into account as a coach and thinking about modeling and supporting social emotional development. But another big component is stress. And it's something that we understand more and more through a healthcare lens, through an educational lens, through a justice lens. Everyone has stress, but some people have more, and it has a big impact on our lives. Everyone has stress, and we need it. There is a positive stress, which is just this normal, essential part of living. If we need to be able to wake up in the morning and have our heart rate elevate, have cortisol spike, and get us out of bed, that's positive stress. We should also be able to work really well with tolerable stress, where our body's alert system can sense a greater degree and they can get through more long-lasting difficulties. So tolerable stress might be something like the loss of a loved one, a natural disaster, an injury. It's something that's activated for a limited time, but because of relationships with adults who help us, thinking back to those trusted adults in your life, hopefully they were there to help support you through some of those tolerable, stressful moments in your childhood. And experiencing support through those helps our brains and our body recover, and it builds our tolerance to experiencing stress throughout life. But then we know that children, as well as adults, experience toxic stress. This occurs when a child experiences that strong, frequent, or prolonged adversity, whether it's physical or emotional. It might be neglect. It could be that their caregivers have substance use disorders or mental illness. There could be exposure to violence. And this really does accumulate. So this is something that doesn't necessarily go away. It's there for a longer period of time, or it comes in so frequently that the body just disrupts the brain development. And it's hard to tell by just looking at someone if they're experiencing toxic stress. It's something that has become really understood to be happening across socioeconomic layers. We're not going to spend a lot of time watching videos, but I did include them. So if it's something that you're interested in, you can come back and look at it. But this is from Harvard, and it just kind of shows what does toxic stress do physically to our bodies. But another piece that's really become prevalent in life is ACEs. ACEs are adverse childhood experiences. And I do want to spend, this video is about 5 minutes long, but I do want to watch this one with you. So if you could just give me a thumbs up if the audio is coming through correctly.
Should we be hearing anything, Shannon?
Yeah,
Yeah.
not hearing any audio yet.
Okay. Okay,
Let's try this.
I'm even trying to find my thumbs down.
Thank you. How's that?
What does your parents'
Better.
divorce have
That
to
sounds
do
great.
with your risk for heart disease? If your mother had a drinking problem when you were growing up, are you more likely to suffer from depression as an adult? Here's what you should know about ACEs. ACEs stand for Adverse Childhood Experiences, extremely stressful events that can happen to a child growing up. Some experiences are so stressful that they can alter brain development, as well as the immune system, increasing the risk of lifelong health and social problems in adulthood. The term comes from the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, landmark research that shed new light on the root cause of everything from stroke and liver disease to substance abuse and mental illness. In the late 1990s, an epidemiologist from the Centers for Disease Control and a preventive medicine doctor at Kaiser Permanente set out to understand the association between childhood experience and lifelong health. They asked over 17,000 people in the Kaiser Health Plan in San Diego about their health history, as well as difficult questions about their experiences growing up. Anda and Felitti tallied up 10 different kinds of adversity in this largely middle-class and college-educated population. They were stunned to see how common ACEs were. 21% of all respondents were sexually abused as children. 19% grew up with someone who suffered mental illness. 28% had been physically abused. And 2 out of 3 respondents had experienced at least one ACE. The researchers next looked at how someone's ACE score, or the number of adversities they experienced, related to a wide array of serious health and social problems. They saw that the more ACEs someone had, the greater their risk for poor outcomes compared with someone with no ACEs. Someone with an ACE score of 4 had twice the risk of heart disease and cancer. Someone with an ACE score of 5 had an 8 times greater chance of being an alcoholic. And those with an ACE score of 6 or more, on average, died 20 years earlier. With every major problem they looked at in the ACE study, the risk went up for each additional adverse experience in childhood. As Dr. Robert Anda says, what's predictable is preventable. It's important to remember that ACEs are not destiny. ACEs are a tool for understanding the health of a population as a whole. For individuals, an ACE score can be a tool for understanding their own risk for health and social problems and empower them to make changes for themselves and their children. ACEs tend to get passed down from generation to generation and are common across all income levels, races, and cultures. But increasingly, people of all different professions and backgrounds are coming together to discuss how ACEs affect their communities. They're finding new ways to treat and prevent ACEs. Many doctors are starting to screen their patients for ACEs as part of their medical history. More schools are becoming trauma-informed, considering the source of problem behavior when disciplining their students, instead of immediately suspending or expelling them. To learn,
We'll pause it right there.
Because between 2020 and 2022, I was an advisor to the United States Olympic and Paralympics Mental Health Task Force. We stood up a mental health task force. We hired staff. We started conducting screenings and putting together crises plans. And we had delayed Olympics. We had all kinds of stuff going on in 2020. One of the things we were really advocating for was to screen athletes for ACEs because of how prevalent they are. And unfortunately, we didn't get the ACEs screener dialed in with some of the other mental health screeners. But anecdotally, we do have a lot of elite athletes who use sport as this protective factor. They've used it to really achieve athletic excellence. And so we don't know by just looking at someone, what traumas, what toxic stress they might have experienced. This chart is really helpful. It's got the household questions that came in that original ACEs study in the tree: homelessness, parental mental illness, alcoholism, domestic violence. But then in the community, the roots of that tree are all these other pieces that the ACEs study didn't even examine. Historical trauma, poverty, lack of jobs, substandard wages, a lot of some of the social conditions that you might be seeing in the athletes that you're coaching here locally. And then we also have this environmental piece. We have natural disasters. We have fires. We have sometimes smoky summers, and just kind of the impending fear of that, the global climate changes that are happening. And we all globally just experienced the pandemic. And so that was this major source of stress and trauma. And a lot of this we don't necessarily have control over. It's not like we're saying as a mountain bike coach, you need to go fix this. It's being aware of it, understanding it in yourself and maybe others. Again, you can really dig into this ACEs study if that's something that's important to you. But the cultural shift that's happening is less of what's wrong with you. Seeing somebody who's just having this complete meltdown, instead of thinking what's wrong with you, we're shifting our thought as to what's happened to you. Has something happened to you? Is this part of your temperament? Is this part of hormonal changes? Is there something more that's going on? We know that for people that are struggling, they're in this downstairs survival brain. So again, I'll send you guys this slideshow, and you can definitely look into it further if this is impactful to you. But in order for a young person to be using their upstairs brain, their thinking brain, to be able to regulate their emotions, to really function in that social emotional learning wheel the way that we want them to, with strong relationships, and to be able to ride and have fun and be part of a team, they have to make sure that their survival brain is taken care of. And it's the adults who can make that happen. So the individual child, the family, the service being like the school setting, life events, as well as society at large, we have the ability to foster risk factors, but we also have the ability to foster protective factors. So for an athlete who maybe has poor physical health, maybe they have a family that has disharmony in it, and at school, they've got really poor relationships skills. That's not a lot that a coach has the power to change. However, a mountain biking coach, a swim coach, a Boy Scout leader, they do have the ability to create warm and supportive relationships. They can create secure attachments. They can create a culture of inclusion and help with these other protective factors. I like this example. Risk factors are, what's happening. We don't have control over the clouds and the rain, but we can bring an umbrella and we can foster, what we do have control over. We have this power. We also think of this kind of as a scale where we don't have a lot of control over those negative outcomes, but we can front load the scale. We can build all of these amazing positive outcomes. And constructive recreation, mountain biking groups, these are some of the really powerful pieces that we have in our lives. And as you're thinking back to those positive adults in your life, when we got together and introduced ourselves, they might also be some of the coaches that you had in your life. So with 10 minutes left, I want to briefly talk about some coaching tips and tricks, because that is a lot to put up there. And in a very short period of time, what can we really focus on? There is an organization that is called Positive Coaching, and they've got a lot of really great tools. They've got some additional trainings that you can take, but they have an acronym that's focused on, whenever coaching, focusing on belonging, autonomy, skill building, and experiences. And so after we break here, I will send out some of those handouts. But this is the base handout. If our base needs are not met, our young people are really going to struggle. They're going to exhibit, some of those certain characteristics that are not so fun to have when we're out there trying to have fun. So when it comes to belonging, an athlete, they might be acting out, they might be causing a disruption. They could be showing like an indifference towards others. They could be really argumentative. And they might be having a clash with their teammates. And so some things a coach can consider doing, these are probably skills that you have, but by thinking about them, by calling them out, we're using these coaching tools a little bit more intentionally. So doing team check-ins at the opening, doing an opening circle to kick things off, this helps those athletes really foster belonging. This is modeling those social emotional learning values that we really want to focus on. Because we don't know if it's happening at school. We don't know if it's happening at home, and it never hurts to see this modeled. Incorporating team building, those getting to know you activities, demonstrating fairness with all players, emphasizing respect for differences, really, highlighting individuality. When it comes to autonomy, an athlete might get angry at other people. They might be super uncooperative. They could be stubborn or just refuse to participate. And so the coach's role can be to ask players to voice their opinions in structured ways. And when you do this in a setting where there is no conflict, it means that it's going to be normalized for when there might be a conflict or there might be a behavior problem. We know that, if you are a parent raising kids, that the way that you parent your kids is going to be very different from coaching other people's kids. I know that a couple of people shared their trusted adults being their friends' moms or their neighbors. And we know that those folks were parenting, they were talking to you, they were coaching you a little bit differently than they were with their own kids. We can ask an athlete to demonstrate. That helps them to create autonomy. We can ask other players to offer suggestions if we've built a culture that highlights that. When it comes to skill building, an athlete might stop when they aren't successful right away. We really have created a generation of individuals who are fearful of failure. It goes back a lot to the technology, the social media, screen-based life. And we could spend 45 more minutes talking just on that. But they might say things like, this is stupid, they're not going to participate, or they might encourage other people to start misbehaving. And so some tips for a coach might be to incorporate some of the fundamental skills that are age level that go towards the sport. It might be going back to the basics of mountain biking in order to get everybody pulled back together. Managing any competitive games, that way folks are not feeling left out based on their skills. Responding to teasing, especially if it's about ability levels, and focusing on praising for progress, not necessarily just performance. I know that there's different levels of what you guys are doing, and some are focused way more on competition, but I know that there's also the beginner groups. So, and then when it comes to experiences, some of the negative behavior that is really discouraging for coaches is when our athletes are bored, they're showing a lack of effort. And so again, asking players what activities they want to play, asking them to kind of be involved in determining the activities that we're doing. I'm going to send you another one just kind of on how to build some of these trusting relationships, how to foster more friendships, more collaboration, feeling safer. Thinking back to getting to know each other. We might assume that everybody knows each other, and that the deeper level of development can be really, really beneficial. Setting clear collaborative group expectations, norming things is so important. I know that for me in my work environments, I expect our meetings and our interactions to kind of be normed, and children are very much the same way. And so what I'd like to do is we only have a few minutes, so maybe there's just a brave person who would like to share out. We don't really have time to go into a breakout session, but here's a scenario. So Jane is new to the club this year. She's also new to her school. She has mountain biked for mountain biked a lot before with her family and her friends. She seems hesitant to fully engage with her peers, but she does talk to you before and after rides early in the season. You are her coach. You're out on the trail and she falls but doesn't seem injured. She becomes very emotional and refuses to get back on her bike. What do you guys think? What would be some ideas for responding to Jane?
So we've actually had some kids really similar to that.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
I don't know if it's the best way to handle it, but one way that I've handled it is to have her split off with one of the coaches and get her away from peers that she's embarrassed around, you know, away from her new potential peers that she must be embarrassed about. And work with her to get her back on the bike, and pointing out the kind of negative consequences of walking all the way back to the parking lot, because it's going to take an hour versus getting on your bike, and then it's only going to take 10 or 15 minutes, can help. And also just showing her the success that she can have by doing that same thing, whatever made her fall down, you know, that rock, or hitting the tree stump with her pedal or something like that, how to get around that obstacle successfully. It's one thing we did with a girl last year that was new. A couple years ago, we just turned it into going over that rock or going over that, whatever that obstacle was, as a whole team event.
Yeah.
That everyone had to do it, and everyone got to either demonstrate a way to, you know, power over it, or demonstrate a timing thing with their pedals so that the pedal didn't strike or something like that. So it turned it into a group problem to solve.
Awesome. Thank you, Dan. So you're definitely practicing some of this base, you know, giving her some autonomy and choice. It's still safe. You were able to have another coach stay back with her and kind of save face while she was, you know, dysregulated emotionally. It's clear that there's like a larger sense of connection that's needed. And without being a therapist, you know, and being in that crisis situation, that's not where we're at. But in the future, you know, thinking about ways to create that belonging and the skill building, the example that you just gave was wonderful. Did anybody else want to add anything? Okay.
I guess in that situation, I would ask her what's going on, like what happened, and have her kind of walk through what happened. Usually, like if it's a rock or a pedal strike, oh yeah, you know, that's happened to me before. I remember one time I fell because of that, you know, kind of make it like, hey, you're not it's not bad, you know, to fall, and it happens. It's part of mountain biking. To kind of just help her see that it's normal, normal part of learning.
Totally agree. And it all depends on relationship and how much trust she has in you. It might be that, you know, as soon as the rest of the group takes off and it's one-on-one that she opens up, she might not be ready. And you don't have to pressure her, but you could always circle back to it if she's still being hesitant and she's still being quiet, you know, circling back to that. And anytime that you can share your vulnerabilities, you know, sharing a time when you've also fallen and been discouraged, but you figured out, you know, what was happening and you worked through it, can be really beneficial to her. So you as a coach, you have the power of being that trusted adult. And when we're looking at building social emotional learning competencies in children, we know that we have to foster trusted relationships with youth. And so the way that we can do that as an adult is to listen when they have a problem. Youth will trust us when we listen when they have a problem, when we help them feel safe. When we respect their body and their personal space, they begin to trust adults. And we know that sometimes we have trusted adults at home and sometimes we don't. But as mountain bike coaches, we can be that trusted adult. We can also use words like, I'll answer your questions. I care about what you think. You can tell me if you have a problem. Those are the types of words that we have that build relationship with our youth. We know that it can be exhausting to be in this role, especially if we have a young person who's struggling. So always remember to put your own oxygen mask on first before helping small children that might need your assistance. You know, we don't want to come from a place where we're exacerbated and exhausted. It's not going to do anything to help them. So as far as resources go, I am going to send along a document that I have too many tabs open. Okay. It's called self-help resources. And so it's got emergency crisis resources, some mental health treatment resources. We've got some support groups and domestic violence, warm lines. So this is more for crisis. And I'll go back to the presentation, but I would love to know more about any resources that you are looking for that I could help round up and provide to you when it comes to social emotional learning. And so before I open it up to questions and ask for resources, I just want you guys to know that when I think of hope, I think of healthy outcomes from positive experiences, which is absolutely what TNT Mountain Biking is doing for our community. So thank you. And I know that we're right a little bit over time, but I'm happy to answer any questions and would love to know more about any resources you'd like.
Well, this presentation was great.
Well, thank you, Dan.
Yeah, I don't know what other resources that we need until we have some particular issue, that comes up, twice, because things come up every single outing.
Yeah.
And I did find it amusing when you talk about your weaknesses and where you had a problem, because then I'd be talking about my ride I had yesterday, where I crashed and
Yeah.
but yeah, this was great.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you. I echo that. I really appreciate you spending the time with us, Shannon. Thank you so much. There's a lot of coaches that want to see this, and we'll be looking at the recording. So that's awesome. One thing that I think would be super helpful is one thing that I found helpful in another program was a resource that helps with how to ask questions. I think a lot of times people get out there, they're sort of acting on their parent role, and they're, want to help the kids build skills. That emotional connection is really what helps us build the relationship so that they can actually listen when we tell them something. So I think that, some icebreakers, some ideas like that might help people frame how they communicate
Okay.
a little better.
You bet. I'll just say one of the things that we teach in like a mental health first aid class is the sentence starter I've noticed. I've noticed that you're not hanging out with the kids after the group wraps. Have you found a friend that you're really confiding in? When you use a phrase like I've noticed, it really takes away a lot of the judgment, and it just becomes a fact that's not necessarily argumentative. But that's one sentence starter, and I can absolutely come up with a nice list of phrasing questions and yeah. Awesome.
Say thank you so much, Shannon. I know you and I work together regularly, and I love seeing the mountain bike lens and the coaching lens put onto this. And I don't think we can say enough. Just that connection before and after an event is really, really impactful. So yesterday we did a little coach ride up in Emigrant, and Kimberly introduced that to do a session where the kids get to know their names. But just that connection goes so far. And starting off, sometimes we think there's not enough time, and someone's like, there's not enough time not to do it, or like it is really impactful. So yeah, but thank you.
Absolutely. Awesome. Well, feel free to reach out anytime. And it was a pleasure spending a half hour with you all.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right.
Thanks,
You're
Shannon.
welcome. Take care.